Coming up on the GospelCast. She instantly goes to Jesus. Like, she knows who to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's, like, her own son, she knows who she needs to go to.
The Pharisees just looking at him like, they're not like reacting to like, they're just watching him flip over tables and just thinking in their heads like, there's a reason behind this.
He didn't need them to make him king. He already is down here for this mission. He already is on earth for one mission. Like,
they prayed on these steps, and each prayer would like diminish 500 years of purgatory. This is what they believed. This is what this type of religion they were practicing.
Here we are, John 2.
Yep.
We're here. There's only two of us.
Yep.
Here we are in John 2, and we are going to continue our study within the book of John. And if I'm for certain, this is actually a shorter chapter. So last time was like, what, 50? Yeah, I could see on top of my Bible, it's like 51 verses. So
yep, it is a short chapter.
Yeah. So yeah, chapter 2 is only 25 verses. Last time it was 51. So John just wanted to make his introduction matter. So
yeah,
that's probably true, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyway, so here we are, and I think we're gonna start.
Start us off, Clark.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna read all of chapter 2. So we're in chapter 2 again, and we're gonna be in chapter 2, verses 1 all the way through 12, and then we're gonna break it down from there. On the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was also invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn it from the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This is the first of his signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and his brothers and disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. Wow.
Yep. Jesus turned water to wine.
Or sweet tea, if we want to put it that way.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Man, if he existed today, I'll go to like a McDonald's. I won't order a drink. I'll just be like, "Can I get a water?" Because some places you get water for free.
Yeah.
But if you get a soft drink, they cost. But like I want that water. And then when we get in the back, me and Jesus, like, "Hey Jesus, can you like turn my water into sweet tea?"
My brother brought up this meme. It says it showed water and then wine, and it said Jesus was here.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah.
So, but in all seriousness, which we're gonna try and make it as jokingly as possible for entertainment. No, I'm kidding. Truly, but let's break this down. Let's like take a little bit verses 1 through 5. It's interesting how just want to clarify that thankfully from a smarter man than me has mentioned how when Jesus is mentioning woman, he's not doing that in like a rude way. He actually in Hebrew he actually mentioned his mother as I think kindly and kinder, not like woman. This is what like he doesn't do it in a rude fashion. So I think somewhere in like the original text, not Hebrew, because that's not what it was written in Greek or Aramaic, right? That's what
Arab. Well, New Testament is written in Greek.
Okay. Yeah. Is it like the Old Testament that's like Hebrew?
Old Testament's Hebrew. Yeah.
None of it's like Aramaic. It's just Greek and Hebrew.
Well, the common tongue back in the day was like Greek in Jerusalem, Greek, Hebrew, and a little bit of Aramaic. But, I mean, there are some scholars say Jesus spoke Aramaic. But I think he did a little bit of Greek, so. But yeah, I mean.
Jesus was smart. He was the smartest man alive.
I mean, he knew every language.
So, well, English wasn't around then, but yeah, I bet he could learn it, and he probably did. But anyway, on the topic of that, I think it's interesting how, as soon as his mother saw that there was no wine left, she instantly goes to Jesus, like she knows who to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's like her own son, she knows who she needs to go to. And then Jesus says, "My hour has not yet come," and then his mother already says to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you."
Why did he say, "My hour has not yet come"?
I think
he wasn't referring to his death, right?
I'm not too sure.
Or is it like, my time of doing miracles has not yet come? Like, you know what I mean? Because you know how like everything was planned way before. We talked about this last podcast. Like everything was planned for him to come down and do what he needed to do, right? Like he was on a mission, but like this is his first miracle. So like, I'm not saying Jesus was pressured, but it seemed like he was pressured to like, oh man, well, they're out of wine. They only got water. So I gotta do something. But it's like he says to his mother, like, my hour's not yet come. I don't know. Is it referring to his death?
Bro, I don't know.
I mean, why would he tell his mother that?
I wonder if it's because
It's a big fat question mark.
It is. I wonder if it's like, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I think he said my hour has not yet come, probably because if he starts doing miracles, that's gonna be like the start of his journey. That's gonna be the start. I mean, he already chose, like, the disciples started following him. So, and around that time, a rabbi had to be 30 years old for people to follow. To be a teacher, you had to be 30 years old.
Yeah.
But he already started his ministry, and I think as he starts this miracle, when he starts the miracle, I think that will lead into that road down to his death, because I think it's dated what he dies around like 33. So it would start the journey of him going towards the cross, going towards that path that his father has set for him. Like, that's why he's here. So I don't know. Like, he knows the path he's going to go down, because
it's interesting, because the other times he talks to Mary, one of the ones is when he's on the cross, and he says,
"True,
behold your mother."
Yeah, behold your mother, and to John, behold. Well, he talks to John first. He goes, "Behold your mother," and then to his mother,
"Behold your son."
Behold your son. Behold your son. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I just think it's interesting that how Jesus is going to initiate this.
I might have to dig into some commentary on that one.
Yeah. True. Yeah. All right. Anyway, we're going to continue. Let's see, verses 6 all the way through, I would say, 10. It talks about how then Jesus begins to do the miracle. It says that he tells the servants specifically to fill up 20 or 30 gallons of this water that he's gonna turn into wine, which they don't know yet. They just think, oh, well, this man's just gonna tell us to go and grab some water. And then he turns it into wine, and I don't know. I think when it comes down to the part where then they bring it out to the master of the feast, and then he says, "Everyone serves the good wine first, but when people have drunk freely, the poor wine. but you have kept the good wine till now. I feel like that's an interesting detail that God put in the scriptures. I don't know. What do you think?
Verse 10? When he says
Verse 10.
And the guy who's talking to him is hold on. And he said to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine. And when the guests have well drunk, then my Bible says, then the inferior. What does yours say?
Poor.
Oh, then the poor. Okay.
Poor wine.
You have kept the good wine until now.
Yeah.
Who's telling that? Who's saying that?
Is
that the master?
Yeah, it says the master of the feast of the bride called the bridegroom. So to be someone head of this feast.
Every man at the beginning sets out the good wine. When the guests have well drunk, then the poor. You have kept the good wine until now? Is he saying that the good wine that he's produced, it's not... Because I think what he's saying is usually like at these bridegrooms, like these wedding parties, like if you showed up right first, mostly it was the rich people, right, that would have the best wine, and then the scraps would be kind of for the inferior with the poor. But the master says, you've kept the good wine until now. So like I guess like the wedding's gone.
Like it flipped its head. Like
it's been going on for a while, and there's still good wine. So I think maybe that's like a reference to that Jesus, like his like he extends life to both rich and poor, like and it goes on forever, right? And that's how I looked at it, like, because the good wine kept going, like they were drinking it, and the water was just it was wine, you know. Usually it'd be out by then. I think that's what the reference was for, but I could be wrong. Another commentary you have to look up for, but
more commentary.
Every time I read this passage, I just think of it as more like a narrative, like just what it's talking about. Like it's just a miracle that happened, and it was one of the first miracles, but there was like, it was just him doing the miracle. There was like no hidden lesson behind it, which there probably is, but whereas, as other miracles are like, there is something to learn from it. This one is just him turning water into wine. So.
True. So then it begins to talk about how then this is the first of his signs. So this is the first miracle, like we were just talking about. This is the first sign of Jesus' miracles. And he's in Galilee, which, not to boast, but I have been there. I literally have a shirt that's from Galilee.
Why you gotta boast?
Bro. But when you look at the water, like, just thinking, like, Jesus, like, do you know, like, where Cana is? Is it supposed to be, like...
You're asking me? Yeah. Do I know where Cana is? No. I know where it's near Galilee.
Well, yeah, I don't... But I know that... I know for certain where...
You've been to Galilee and you have know where...
Bro, they only took me so many places. But just speaking about Galilee, like, that's going to be... We're actually going to come back... I think... Did we come back to Galilee, or is that another gospel? I think that's another gospel, is it?
Where he goes on the...
Yeah, it actually says he walks on water. So we're going to come back to Galilee because Capernaum is by Galilee. Mm-hmm. So we're going to come back to Galilee very soon. But when I was there... I just looked at the water. I was like, man, like this water is not only just like just water. It's like special, because this is where Jesus did. Our pastor talked about how around the Sea of Galilee is where Jesus did probably 70% of his miracles.
Amazing.
I'm like,
I want to go there so bad.
I know. I encourage everybody to go, but when they, but. It is really cool, but just thinking of it in a way. But yeah, so then he leaves and he manifests his glory as it talks about when he does that miracle. But nobody knows. Only the people that, I would say, the people he talked to that said, "This is what you need to do." Only they knew. They were like, "Who is this man?" They don't know who his name is, but they know that this man just did something that we'd never seen before. So
Yeah.
And that's going to escalate further.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he leaves with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they stay there for a few days because usually feasts back then, I think they still do it now, but when there's like a ceremony or a wedding or something like that, some kind of feast, it actually goes on for like at least, I think the maximum is like a week. Like this feast would just keep going on. So
what about verse 6? Now there were set there 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Why was that put in the scriptures? Like
what part are you talking about? Just that thing?
Just I mean, there's a reason why there's detail here, like the purification symbolism of what the Jews would use. Like, what was that for? Wasn't there like a ritual that they did in Judaism where for purification of like sin or something, they dipped themselves in the water, the Jordan, and but they can't touch something, or it's something with water that they used, and I've always wondered why that's in here when it comes to wine. And Jesus turning that water into wine. What do you think that means? Yeah, we are digging into some hard stuff.
Yeah, we're digging into some hard stuff. It's like questions about questions. Yeah, I would say, yeah, I think maybe like I think when it says purification, maybe it's like water specifically, like that is because it's set up in the Jewish area, right? So I guess if it says purification, because it's talk about water, maybe it's like, I don't know, this special water they thought, like this holy water that they got. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll have to look more into this, because I do remember our pastor did talk about this sermon. You remember it? I mean, he explained that purification. I have to go back into it and remember. But I remember it had a really good significance into this passage. But
yeah. True. Okay, I don't know. Would you like to read verses 13 all the way through 22? And we'll
sure.
talk about it. Yeah,
go ahead. All right, here we go. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those who sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers doing business. When he had made a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overturned the tables. And he said to those who sold doves, "Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise." Then his disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house has eaten me up." So the Jews answered and said to him, "What sign do you show to us, since you do these things?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Then the Jews said, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. Therefore, when he had risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this to them, and they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had said.
I just want, before we, just jump into, the entire thing, I think it's interesting that John points out that he's like, okay, this is, in verse 22, he points out, when he was raised from the dead, they remembered this saying. Because he points it out, he says that he is taking a glance into the future of his chapter, into his gospel. And I mean, he's writing from his entire witness, what he saw and what he heard. And I think it's interesting that he brings it back. He says,
like a flashback.
Yeah, like a flashback. But in this, for people that don't know, that just pick up this book and just read it, it's literally a foretelling of this is what the disciples remembered when he said this, when he rose from the dead, when Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as we jump into verses 13 to 17, I mean, this is where Jesus turns those tables, bro. Jesus would be the ultimate DJ right there. So
Jesus were to come down to earth and just like have like a little visit to most American churches today, he'd be flipping over tables.
I just want to like clarify that this, maybe you already know about this, but when you look at this is actually, Jesus is angry, but he's angry because it's with sin. It's like what you were just talking about, like that he would turn tables because he's angry with sin. He's not doing this just to be like, whatever. He's doing it in a sense of he's showing a sign. This is called righteous anger, which is something that's very hard for any of us to do.
Yeah, a lot of us, we do have some righteous anger. I mean, if you kind of like look at the world, we watch the news.
Yeah.
We can sit there and we're just like angry, you know, like why has this happened?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they doing this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah.
Or like we get mad at our government for making certain political choices, right? So, you know, I think as a believer, when you have the Spirit in you, you produce that righteous anger at certain things, you know? And sometimes it's even directly towards your own sin, you know? Where you're angry at like, what am I doing, you know? Well, just got to do better next time. But I think it's important to know that like Jesus creates this good example of zeal, you know, where it says, quotes from the Old Testament, like, zeal for your house has eaten me up. Like, we should show reverence to church and reverence to like how we deal with things in church and how we worship God. Like every method, every act, every thought, every motive we have when we come to church should be directly towards Jesus.
True.
And we shouldn't be, because I think the modern day church, like everything, a lot of churches today, it's money flowing, money coming out, cash in, cash out, and prosperity gospel. Like everything's about business, and most churches have become corporations because, I mean, if you read into like certain articles, they sign a bunch of NDA agreements, which is something that's only in a business corporation of like Whataburger or you know, just a regular business would do, a non-disclosure agreement. Well, they're having that happen in churches nowadays so they can hide certain things, cover up certain sins. But man, if Jesus came down, or Paul was here, he'd be writing a church called First Americanonians. You know what I mean?
No, it'd be the First Americans.
He'd be like, Apostle Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, I have heard of your faith, and it's very
disturbing.
Yes. Like, but Jesus kind of like, he flips over the table. He creates a whip, like he's Indiana Jones. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah, he doesn't just flip over tables. He literally takes like a cord and whaps.
He's like, shwam.
I think it's interesting that what you said, because that's so true. Because our churches, like, we look at this, they're literally taking the temple that was specifically chosen. Like, God told them to build it so you could worship me, not so you could have a party and just sell. Because they're selling merchandise. They're making a profit rather than, they're making a profit instead of giving the praise. You could say they're praising. You could say they're kind of worshiping what they can receive from other people and what moolah they can get, than actually understanding what the temple was intended to be, which is what you were just saying about the modern church. That's basically what the temple was, because people would go to the temple to hear, go to synagogue and hear the words, hear the scriptures.
And this is not this wasn't just happening in the modern church. Like if you look back in the old Crusades church, and back then the Roman Catholic Church dominated most of Europe. And if you read back in like in the 1500s, they were literally trying to convince people, most of their congregants, like if you want to like have salvation, you have to pray on these steps. And read into this, like they prayed on these steps, and each prayer would like diminish 500 years of purgatory. This is what they believed. This is what this type of religion they were practicing. But not just that, but like they had priests that would go out in the marketplace, and they would have signs of like frightening pictures of hell and stuff.
Yeah.
And they would be like, give us 2 denarii or whatever the currency was, and this will be gone.
True.
And do you know what that is? That's called simony. That's something that in the book of Acts that one of the people was trying to sell the Holy Spirit. And Peter, and then what happens? Jesus, or God, killed that guy on the spot, because you don't sell the Holy Spirit. It's not something that is transactional. And that if that was happening in the 1400s of what they were doing to congregants, it's still happening today. And man, I feel so bad. Like,
people just don't learn from the past. Like, that's what they're just
like. Why can't church just be like a place where, I mean, there are some certain revivals that are still happening today. There are churches that are really biblical, that they adhere to the teachings of, like, you know what, this place is, we're not trying to make it big. We're not trying to make big church. We're not trying to make it like so amazingly like the world. We're just trying to be very simple.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and not trying to be political, but also like now like progressive churches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like they're going off the rails.
They may not be selling like a prophet, but they are sure selling false prophets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're not trying to make money off of something, but they're rather they're trying to make a profit of like how much can I get people to come into the doors?
Yeah, to look at the audience.
Yeah, and believe in this, false doctrine. But I present it to them like it's a good doctrine. Somewhere in Hebrews, I was just reading this earlier today, that it says, "Be careful what doctrines you hear," in Hebrews 13, and that is so true. I mean, progressive churches there.
And then, and going off of like that, then it just reminded me of what 2 Timothy. Chapter 2, verses 2 through 4, literally, like, this is when Paul's talking to Timothy, and he says, be careful, because people, like, literally, let me just turn to that so I don't butcher what I'm going to say. Chapter 4, chapter 4, it says, verses 2 through 4, preach the word, be ready in season and out of season, which basically means whether you want to hear or not, whether they want to hear or not, you preach no matter what you feel like. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with complete patience and in teaching, for the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but have itching ears. They will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. And then I'm going to add verse 5. As for you, always be sober-minded, enduring suffering, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry.
Yep. And that's literally what God wants his believers to do. Just be simple, preach the gospel, and that's it. Let God do the one who's going to save, and
that's kind of, going off of that, that's kind of, if we're being honest, it's kind of like hard to remember, because we were like, if we mess up something, like when we're trying to like evangelize to somebody, like I bet we've talked about this. You've had that
the other day
exactly.
That happened to me. Like I legit was trying to talk to this guy, and it was at La Cantera, and as soon as I got down and I said the name, do you have a relationship with Jesus? Do you know who Jesus is? Can I talk to you about him? Like, he said, I don't want to talk to you right now, and he dipped and ran away. I mean, people don't just walk away. They run away from the name of Jesus sometimes, and that's how you know there's a spiritual battle right there. But, like, but coming back to the temple, like...
True.
It's kind of like very convicting to have more zeal, not just for church, but just I think for the things of God, not like how church is supposed to be, like the methods and like, oh, we need to have this worship team, or oh, we gotta have this kids ministry, middle school, high school, oh, we gotta have all these things. And I think a lot of churches, we shouldn't look through like an external perspective of how to do church, but rather Jesus is giving an example of like, because this is the old he's referencing also Old Testament. This is like the New Testament now, the very beginning stages. And for all those years, all the times where they go in the temple, just kept doing the cycle of, the Levitical practices.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
even when they just went in the temple to read scripture,
right?
Like, it was all it was reading scripture and worship God. But nowadays, it's like we got to put all these elements, all these external forces that don't really matter. And then, because then when we put all of our focus on the external, then we lose our focus on the internal and the intent. And I think Jesus represents a great example. Like, stuff goes bad, just, just flip over the table, get a whip.
Yeah. Just get a whip.
Jesus need an Indiana Jones hat,
Yeah, that's what you need, bro. That's what you need. You need an Indiana Jones hat. There you go.
By the way, Indiana Jones is coming out June 30th. I'm excited to watch it.
I know you are.
Come on, I know you are too. Have you seen all of them?
Be honest, no.
Are you serious, dude? You've not seen any of them.
Forgive me, audience, I have not.
When you go home, you better watch one. Then when you read this and you see Jesus had the whip and you see Indiana Jones had the whip, you're like,
Hashtag Clarke needs to watch Indiana Jones. Huh?
Yes.
I swear if people start spamming that.
Comment if you tell him he needs to watch this.
But basically, what we're saying is we just need to make church back to church, not church as in like we need to get more eyeballs. We need to get more praise to the one who is. Like our pastor says, sometimes to grow a church, you need to shrink a church. Well,
It's not always about numbers and we got 45,000 baptisms this year. Like, it's all about statistics. Those are cool, right? Those are really good to like look at, but sometimes we can lose our focus on it by thinking, it's about the numbers, it's about the progression,
right,
rather than the intent. So.
Yeah. So then after that, Jesus, then the Jews ask him, like, literally, can you imagine? Let's just be in the person's shoes right here. Okay, let's pretend we're there in the temple, right? We're just minding our own business. Maybe we're not even like the money changers. We're just sitting there, we're just like chilling out. And also we see this guy walk up and he starts flipping tables, starts like whipping all these tables. And they're all like, but can you imagine, like, all of them are going to be like shocked.
I'm surprised the Roman forces didn't come and like try to arrest Jesus,
right?
Yeah.
It's like, I actually did not think about that, man. Yeah, like the Romans didn't do anything. They're just like,
weren't they kind of like around the place, kind of like in patrol?
They probably were. Yeah, they probably were. They were like everywhere. Like you said, like we were talking.
They might have just been deaf and didn't hear the money falling on the floor and the tables. Who knows?
They were deaf from like money just falling.
Yeah.
Just tables just flipping. Oh, my ear infection. It's getting worse. But then anyway, as I'm saying this, as we're talking about, as we're back in the shoes, the Jews then come up to Jesus. They're like, "What sign do you show us from doing these things?" Interesting. They say, "What sign?" It's like they knew what he did at Cana. They said, "What sign?" Because they know who he is.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, true.
Like they know who he is.
Like as if, what is your intent on flipping these tables?
True.
Like he just did this out of nowhere.
That is true, because they don't actually they don't just lash out on him like, "Why did you do this?"
Like, what's your problem? Like, we're trying to do something here.
Or maybe they did. Just John just didn't implement.
But maybe there was a reason why he asked him this. Like think of it like this: if you were in that place, in that time period when Jesus flipping over the tables and the Pharisees just looking at him like they're not like reacting to like. They're just watching them flip over tables and just thinking in their heads like, there's a reason behind this. Like, you ever have your mom just like tell you, what are you really doing? That's like what.
Yeah, you got that.
what did you really hide from me?
You got the glasses.
Yeah, like
what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. And they call you by your full name, Tristan Taylor. Yeah, but
Clarke.
Yep.
So.
But that's I think about like that. Like they just look at him like, yeah, there's something behind this, and so they ask him that question. I never saw that till now. Like I mean, I've read it a million times, but
True.
it actually makes me think like Pharisees were smart, but they were trying to get something out.
Yeah. So then, as they ask, "What side do you do this?" Jesus says, destroy this temple, and I'll raise it up in 3 days." And the Jews get confused. They're like, "Excuse me? You're telling us that we're gonna this temple is gonna be destroyed?" They're like, "This is not, like." They're thinking in their minds in material form, and like what they can see, physical form, what they can see. They're not looking at like what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about the temple of his body, where he will be destroyed in 3 days and be raised up on the third. So, yeah, because I think.
And then they say like a very arrogant comment. They're like, "It has taken 46 years to build the temple,
like
and you think you're gonna raise it up in 3 days?" Like, I was a little sarcastic and a little arrogant, you know.
Yeah, that is true. So then we're back down to verse 22 because we see that this is Jesus is talking about the temple of his body as John is referencing, which he does that a lot. He makes sure his audience knows, his readers know what he's talking about. So he doesn't. I mean, yeah, he doesn't leave him like hanging like a cliffhanger, like, oh yeah, this happened, and then he just stops. He like kind of gives a little context, a little bit of what's happening. So then, we're back to verse 22 where he talks about these signs are what are shown, and his disciples remembered it after Jesus rose from the dead. So now we're back. Now I'm going to read these 3 short verses of John chapter 2. Verse 23, all the way to 25, verse 23. Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs that he was doing. But Jesus on his part did not entrust himself to them, because he knew all people and needed no one to bear witness about man, for he knew what was in man.
He knows what you're thinking right now, Clarke.
He knows what you're thinking about too, Tristan.
Yeah, I know. He knows what I'm thinking about. But, yeah.
I think it's interesting that John puts that in here. It says that Jesus did not entrust himself. When I looked at it, I was looking into this. I'm like, what does that mean? Because I was reading it. I was like, what does that mean? What's these 3 verses like? It's kind of like a mind boggler. Like, what is it?
It's like an interesting transition to this. It's very short.
Yeah.
Usually short passages produce like very big messages.
Yeah. So I was looking at this, and it says that. So let's break it down. Now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name and saw what he was doing. So many people have believed in him. And then verse 24, as I read a while ago when I was looking at this, apparently it was they wanted to make him king. They wanted to like make him like this like all-powerful leader.
Is it because like you know how when it was like when he fed the 5,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he went across the Galilee. Those people wanted to go with him, but they went in like some different boat and they followed him on the other side of Galilee. And then he says, "You only want me because I gave you the loaves and the fish."
Now then he says, which we're going to talk about soon, "Eat my flesh and my blood," and then they all.
Is everything I'm saying in the Gospel of John?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of the Gospels they kind of just recount.
Yeah, they kind of count.
Hey yo, chill
Let me water here.
No, but for real, I think. So they were trying to make him king at that moment.
Yeah,
they
were trying to put him in a high position. But it said at verse 25, he needed no one to bear witness about him, man, for he knew what was in man. He didn't need them to make him king. He already is down here for this mission. He already is on earth for one mission, one purpose. That is to fulfill his Father's plan. So he's not He's not gonna hand himself over to. Well, he's not gonna.
He doesn't want to hand himself over to like praise and the pride of man and the pride of life.
Yeah.
He wants to like, I have a mission, and I'm gonna go fulfill it.
Isn't that so cool that Jesus, like, he gets all the praise, he gets all the followers, but what he wants is just true work. Like he just every time, like it's so interesting how Jesus is praying to his Father when he, but he like lowers himself. Like it says it in Philippians, like he lowered himself to make himself as equal with God. He lowers himself down. So this could have been an opportunity where he could have given in and said, like, because he was God, but he was also man, 100% man, 100% God, the first 200% person.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he could have given in to all the fame and all the popularity, but he said, no, I'm going to do my Father's plan. Yeah. I'm going to do my Father's will.
You ever heard of the pilgrim mindset?
No, but you're going to tell me.
You ever read Pilgrim's Progress? It's one of the most famous. It's actually number 2 in most read book in all the world, like next to the Bible, like number 1.
It fluctuates a lot.
No, I'm serious. Look it up. I'm serious. This is one of the like world-renowned books for like Christian literature. But anyways, Pilgrim mindset is like, I think what you're talking about is like Jesus is his whole intent is Father's plan. I came here to redeem and save the lost, right? I came here to die for sinners, you know, and you know, to rise from the dead, right? And like you said, he could have like, man, I want the praise. I got all these people following me. You know, I mean, he was tempted in the wilderness by the devil.
I mean, we're already tempted when there's people online and they get like 1,000 followers.
I mean, and what's interesting is what I was reading about the pilgrim mindset. It was a sermon by Jonathan Edwards that was like in the 1733 he recorded this sermon. Yeah. And what he was saying is that a pilgrim is someone who's like, you ever heard of a pilgrimage where it's like a traveler wanting to travel to another place, right? And like, you know, it's all about like the journey, getting there, right? And it's either usually for religious purposes. Yeah. Well, for a pilgrim, Christian pilgrim, our home is not here. Our home is in heaven. So we're fellow pilgrims with other brothers and sisters who are facing our eyes onto Jesus. In Hebrews it says that we don't long for this city here, but we long for a continuing city that is to come. And it's like, and what Jesus, even he was poor, right? He didn't have like a house he stayed forever in his life. He always stopped at different houses to stay at. And that's how a pilgrim is. Like, he's on this journey and he keeps going, right? But he usually will stop at inns, like hotels, you know, just stay for the night and then keep going, right? And Jesus is demonstrating that same thing. He doesn't want to entrust himself to these people that want to make him king and praise him. And it's good to praise Jesus. Like, I mean, you got the Apostle Peter saying, "You are the Son of God. You're the only one." Like, that's a praise. That's a praise moment. You know, he's praising God by just saying a few words. You know, and Jesus says, like, "Truly, truly, I say to you, like, that is a good thing," or something like. Well said, but the whole idea here is that Jesus is trying to give that example of, you know, even as us Christians, like we're continuing this Christian life. We're struggling with sin, but we're being sanctified as we're going, and like we're gonna have people who are gonna try to tag from our right arm and left arm, like this, right? And they're trying, and those represent like praise, you know, the pride of life. You know, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and they're just constantly tagging on us. But we have to like rip it away and just keep our eyes on the road. And even though Jesus' final destination was the cross, that was his whole plan, right? And along the way, it was ministry, you know, doing all these things. Miracles were supposed to bear witness of and testify that he is the Son of God, right? So,
yeah. Person that lived for a radical person who lived for 33 years and started his ministry for 3 years radically changed our world.
Oh, yeah.
And people are still talking about him today, whether they like him or not. Like, he's like the most famous person around, not because God deserves our praise, but he doesn't he doesn't
need our
he doesn't need our praise. Yeah. He could have created people that don't, but those would be robots. That's the whole thing, is that, like we talked about last time, that free will. Did we talk about free will last time?
We talked about free will, but a little bit of it.
Yeah. Well, let's bring this back. That, like you were saying, like, he doesn't need our praise. He doesn't need us to worship him. He could have created robots that just worship him, but he creates us with free will, which allows us to choose the difference between right and wrong, what's just and unjust. He allows us to choose. And
remember how I said that just and unjust moral compass comes from God.
Right.
That it's a gift that he's given. It's like a common grace that he gives both to unbelievers and believers. Like, what does Jesus say? He says that I let the rain fall, or my Father lets the rain fall on the just and the unjust. Yeah. It's the same idea here. When all of us are made in God's image, all of us are given this common grace. All of us have been given morality, and discerning what is good and what is bad. Some other people are like, we can go into some more talk about, like, psychopaths and like serial killers,
Right.
But we all know from those stories, some people have more of an urge to turn away from morality, but that's because of the condition of man. I think that's what Jesus, right? At the very end of verse 24, he says, "For he knew what was in man." And I think that's a really interesting point there, because it's like he knows our heart, right? He knows our heart is wicked, desperately sick, as Jeremiah would say, right? And that we're so inclined, in our first disposition is to sin. That's the only thing we knew. That's the only thing we know. But then when you come to Christ and Jesus saves you, you have that disposition of sin there, but you can choose to do good. Like you're willing to deny that flesh and to follow Christ because his ways are better, right?
Right.
But right here, since you were already saying that they were trying to make him king and do something for the wrong reasons, because they were looking at it through the horizontal perspective rather, for a vertical perspective. Yeah.
Man, this passage has a lot packed into it, and man, I'm excited to continue the journey.
Continue the pilgrim journey.
The pilgrim journey, the Pilgrim's Progress 2 with Tristan Budd and Clarke on it. So, and Lane Owens. So,
and more to come.
And more to come. Oh, more to come. Like, more people might show up.
Who knows? Special guest.
A girls episode. I don't know.
Who knows?
Who knows what's gonna happen? But I'm excited. Whatever happens, I'm excited to continue this podcast, and I'm excited for chapter 3. That's all I'm gonna say. Where we're gonna get into chapter 3 is gonna be the passage that has rocked this world to this day, with John 3:16.
Yes.
But more on that later.